like to invite anyone who would like to join us by asking a question. We have a question. If you have any evidence, like what would you use to cite that Jesus was or was not consuming dairy products?
Well, what is there evidence that Jesus did consume dairy? I mean, you can turn it right back around. The evidence that Jesus was purely vegan, which is what is paramount, was a pure vegetarian, purely vegan, is that founding church fathers wrote that they were from the Essenes, the Nestorians, who eventually became the original Judaic Christians, and they were known to be purely vegetarian, vegan. So that's the evidence, one of the evidentiary factors that establish that Jesus was vegan. There's no proof that Jesus ate dairy at all. If you read the literature, it says they abstained from all foods derived from animals.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. There was a museum exhibit going around for quite some time that was called the Dead Sea Scrolls, and that exhibit did give detailed accounts of Jesus's life and his daily life, in fact, and it was coming from the perspective of the Essenes, and they showed that he was eating dried fruits and other things along those lines. We have another question. This is from Dr. Mighty May, and she's asking, what can we do to raise awareness about the original Christians being vegan to present-day congregations?
Get in there, go to the churches, communicate with them. I went to the Seventh-day Adventist church here, and I got 4 people to change over to being vegan. Believe it or not, Seventh-day Adventists are known to be more prone to be vegan, but out of the 60 parishioners, only 2 were. So getting 4 more on the boat was pretty good. You have to communicate. When I first got there, I got into a little bit of a heated discussion with one of the elders. And he said to me, animals have no soul. And, I had to keep from exploding, but I kept my cool and said, do you know Hebrew? And he said, no. I said, well, if you knew Hebrew, you would read in the Bible that says animals were born with living souls, nefesh hayim, nefesh being soul and hayim being life. And the word animal itself, the etymology of it, is mind, spirit, soul. So for you to say that animals don't have souls is totally erroneous. It's fallacious, according to the very Bible that you say you believe in. So we have to communicate with people and dispel them of their false notion of what they've been taught, because they've been taught incorrectly by people who have agendas, who want a lot of money, who want to eat a lot of meat, who are materialistic. And that's exactly the opposite of what Jesus was.
Wow. So we have a couple other questions. This is someone named Lauren. She's asking, can you speak to the loaves and fishes story?
Oh, Lord.
From a vegan perspective?
That's what everyone brings up. That's tops on their list. And you always have to equate the emperor's new clothes. And that falls into place with so many things applying to people. People see what they want to see, what is not there, and don't see what they don't want to see, which is there. And there are so many angles to this. As a matter of fact, the movie that I would like to make, Jesus, the greatest story never told, right? The Truth, Vegan Jesus, would open up with a stadium full of Christians. Let's say a Billy Graham type situation. And people are cheering, stadium after stadium, thousands upon thousands of Christians. And you walk in there and say, how many times is the feeding of the multitudes recounted in the Bible? And everyone would go silent, because none of them know. None of them know how many times the feeding of the multitudes is recounted in the Bible. And it's recounted 8 times. 3 in Matthew, 3 in Mark, 1 in Luke, and 1 in John. And the 3rd time that it's recounted in Matthew and Mark, it's directly quoted from Jesus. It's not a narrative. And he says, you forget, you did not understand when I fed you with the loaves. And he purely says, I fed you with the loaves. He does not say the fish when Jesus is directly speaking to them. So that's two times of mass importance because that's being quoted by Jesus directly. I fed you with the loaves. Okay, so that's two down where the fishes are omitted. The first instance of Matthew 14, if you read it, it says, he took the loaves and gave them to the disciples and asked them to distribute it. It says he took the loaves and gave them to the disciples. It doesn't say he gave the fishes to the disciples. That's three there. So right away, we're getting 3 out of 8. The first one in Mark says those who ate of the loaves were 4,000. It does not say they ate of the fishes. So that's 4 down already. We could even go on with other material there that's quite revealing in relation to the feeding of the multitude. Founding church fathers, Irenaeus, Arnobius, Eusebius, write about it in the first few centuries. And they only speak of the loaves being fed in the feeding of the multitude. As well, in the other accounts of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Jesus says, how many loaves do you have? He never says, how many fish do you have? And as well, Rinberry did a very good translation in the last gospel, the gospel according to John, where he points out that the word used is upsaria in Greek. And that's a Mediterranean spread made of tahini and pickled vegetables. So again, you have a vegetarian bread-adorned food. So again, no fish.
Great. Well, thank you for addressing each one of these specific mentions in the Bible. That's really helpful. I'm going to share another question for you. Rebecca Allen is asking, do you have any indication that Jesus was pained by the lack of people understanding the harm of eating animals?
Oh, pain? Pain was miserable. It was excruciating, storming into the sacrificial temple. As a matter of fact, that's a great question. That's why these books are so great, the ones that I mentioned, The Forgotten Beginnings of Creation in Christianity. When Jesus stormed the temple, he says that Martin Luther translated it as, you have turned my father's house into a murderer's pit. Now, this is a sacrificial animal temple. Okay, and Rinberry, the final gospel, the gospel according to John, translates it as, you have turned my father's house into a meat market, a butcher shop. And that drove Jesus crazy. That's why he was killed. So yeah, it was suffering because people would not listen to the spiritual vegan message. Oh, it was paramount.
Thank you. We have lots of questions for you. One is from your dear friend Nancy Kogel, who put
Yay.
together that wonderful video.
Oh, by the way, Nancy does a great program on New York City cable, a great vegan program, and is a tireless activist.
Yes, she is. Nancy's asking, she says, a lot of people say animals have no souls and therefore their lives don't matter. How would you respond to that?
It's good to reinstate it. The Bible literally says on the 6th day, the prime creation were the animals before humans. We were the last. But it did say that animals were created with living souls, nefesh chayim. So this is a supposition that spurious, it's slanted, it's prejudiced. It's not true, it's not factual at all. Animals, according to the Bible, were created with souls, if we're going to use that kind of terminology.
Well, thank you. How does one become ordained as a vegan deacon of compassion?
Well, okay. We're not on good terms anymore. Just a little bit touchy to go into this. When I saw him on your program, I saw a vegan pastor, and I called him up to give him support and say, any way I could support you, please let me know. And if we could work together, that would be wonderful. So we developed an association and we started telling each other about each other. And I mentioned that we took care of animals. And he thought my knowledge of the Bible was pretty darn good. As a matter of fact, Minister Frank Hoffman thinks that I've scrutinized the Bible well enough to communicate these things like the loaves and the fishes, you know. So as we were talking, we became very friendly. And one day he said to me, I'm going to make you minister of kindness. I said, okay, I'm not asking for it. It sounds good, if you think that it's warranted, okay. And a little time went past, and he brought it up to his church, and they said, he doesn't have the experience, so we can't exactly make him a minister. And he mentioned deacon. And he finally sent me a legalized document, and it said the Reverend, it said Reverend Michael Berenzweig, and then it said Deacon of Compassion, ordained vegan deacon. So that came about from the presbytery of the church. It's nice to have because people would say, oh, this person's a reverend. If he's talking about Jesus being vegan and Christianity being vegan, kid know what he's talking about.
Great. Well, thank you, Michael. And there's maybe a couple more questions in prayer. One question is connected to the other, and one is Paula Franklin asking, are you a Messianic Jew? And the second part of this question is, was Jesus essentially crucified for his position on animal slaughter?
Yes, the second one, without a doubt. Even the Bible indicates that when he broke into the sacrificial temple and said, close down the butcher shop, close down the meat market, close down the murderer's pit. That's what the priests were saying. How do we kill this guy? So, yes, he was. I'm not exactly sure what Messianic Jew is. Could she explain that a little bit?
Well, I think in this case, she's asking if you identify as a Messianic Jew. So I guess the answer would be no if you haven't heard of it.
Well, I would identify myself as in the same ballpark that you're in interfaith. My favorites are Buddhism and Taoism, but if Christianity and Judaism and Islam are right there in the vegan boat, they're all wonderful.
Great. Well, thank you again. This has been such a wonderful opportunity to hear all of your knowledge. I think it's time for us to do our closing prayer.
And the prayer could be that all of us, holistic, organic vegans, compassionate, ethical, communal vegans, band together and work together at changing this world into a great world from the horrible slaughterhouse world that it is. And a big part of it would be revealing to the various religious institutions that core of spirituality is exactly vegan spirituality. Amen.
Amen.
Yes. So thank you. It's such a perfect way to close out our evening together. It's a very special time that we have for the people who've joined and the people who helped to prepare each time we meet, because we are truly exploring veganism as a spiritual practice together, creating that common bond of compassion for all living beings. So again, thanks to everyone for joining us, and may peace be with you and with all beings. Welcome to our Vegan Spirituality online gathering. My name's Lisa Levinson, and I am one of your hosts this evening. I work for In Defense of Animals, and we're so proud to present this program on vegan spirituality to explore veganism as a spiritual practice. We host this program interviewing spiritual leaders from all around the world. I'm going to invite my co-host, Judy Carman, who wrote Peace to All Beings. She's going to introduce our special speaker,
Reverend Michael Berenzweig, and we're so thrilled to have you with us. Michael has been vegan for over 25 years, but prior to that, he and Marilyn, his wife, were mostly vegan in 1971, almost 50 years ago. So that's got to be a record. As more information came out, they gave up leather 35 years ago and became strict vegans 25 years ago. So it's a real honor to be with someone that saw the light so long ago. Michael was ordained as a Vegan Deacon of Compassion in 2018. And in addition to co-hosting and co-producing his own vegan radio show on WBAI-FM Pacifica, he has been a featured speaker on many other radio programs where he has promoted vegan living. He interviewed the late Renberry. We're sad to have lost him. He did a lot of great books, and one of them was Food for the Gods. Vegetarianism and the World's Religions. Reverend Berenzweig also has a sanctuary for injured and orphaned birds, including starlings, sparrows, chickens, pigeons, and cats. And hopefully they all get along. He's also introduced a segment on Coast to Coast AM with No More, the Yale physicist of EarthSafe International, where they discuss the role of animal agriculture in climate change, and he debated Robert Kennedy on the same subject. He also continues to share the vegan message in many other venues as well. But one of his primary areas of interest, and one thing I know we're all anxious to hear about, is his compelling message about Jesus being vegan. He has researched the subject deeply and believes that Jesus not only practiced veganism, but required it of his followers. He has plans to start his own church based on holistic, organic, communal, grassroots, ethical, compassionate veganism. What a wonderful church that will be. Reverend Berenzweig, welcome. And let me start out by asking you about your early days. You're among the earliest vegans, I think, in North America, probably. What was it that inspired the two of you?
What got us started was our mutual empathy for animals and for life. I gravitated as a young person towards Buddhism. Buddhism is veganism as well. By the way, your introduction, there's nothing more to say. You did a great introduction. And your book, Peace for All Beings, is really wonderful. Let me just say that too. I would say Buddhism led the path to veganism, Taoism, but as well, one cannot be in our culture not influenced by the concept of Jesus and the personhood. And there was always a feeling that, of course, this person had to be right there with the others. And you mentioned Rin Berry, his great book, Food for the Gods. That got me started 21 years ago. On the very same station, we eventually did vegan programming. And that's Nancy Kogel from Roar, Reaching Out for Animal Rights. I heard Rin Berry in 1998 being interviewed, and he said that Jesus was vegan, and he made some very, very convincing statements. So I got his book. Food for the Gods is a great, great book. Covers all the religions, Taoism, Buddhism, Islam, Jain, all the denominations of Christianity, Judaism, and all of them began as vegan requiring practices. So it's really, really fascinating. And as time went along, I said to myself, well, the most popular person in the world, the most respected person in the world, right? Son of God, God incarnate, taught, required, commanded veganism. What's up? Let's get this out there and change this world from what it is to what it gloriously could be. I read Food for the Gods and read the different books that were contained within the bibliography. The Vegetarianism of Jesus Christ by Charles T. Veslavic. Rin Berry told me we used to speak regularly that that's what inspired him to write Food for the Gods. Reading the Vegetarianism of Jesus Christ, he followed Charles Veslavic on his lecture circuit. And it literally says in that book, church fathers wrote that Jesus commanded me to be vegetarian. So that really is profound. What more can be said? I have visions of a movie with Jesus, the greatest story never told, Jesus Christ, vegan Jesus, to have an overnight conversion to a true vegan Christianity.
I've read that book too, The Vegetarianism of Jesus, and I highly recommend it. But before I go on, I wanted to mention to everybody there's a video about you and Marilyn and the birds. How can they find it? It was really good.
By the way, if I could say, it's an honor to be on your program. which was graced by Pastor Rob Monroe of the Humanitarian Church and Reverend Carol Saunders and Father Donatello Iocco. Great program that you have.
Well, thank you. So one of your main teachings is that Jesus was vegan and taught nonviolence. As we know, those teachings have been lost.
Not exactly lost. They were purposely buried
Tell us about that.
by the Romans who took over Christianity and turned it on its head. For example, The Vegetarianism of Jesus Christ by Charles Slavic. The subtitles are The Communalism, Pacifism, and Vegetarianism of Primitive Christianity. Historical evidence that Jesus and the disciples not only were vegetarian, but taught the practice to their followers. And the book expounds on that greatly. But what's also more than intriguing is that you can use the Bible as it exists, to extract the same conclusion. Every day is a learning day and a way to hone your abilities to communicate. I was on a Christian vegan site and we were having a discussion about this. And this gentleman who's vegan, but a Christian Bible zealot, was saying to me, where in the Bible does it prohibit eating meat? I don't want to be condescending. I feel like writing back that's silly, because where does it say in the Bible that you can't bust a person's window down and steal all their accoutrements? As a matter of fact, it does say you can eat meat. It's a question of nomenclature connected with language. And if you look at the etymology of the word meat from Skeet's Etymological Dictionary of 1611, when the King James Version was fashioned and issued, it says meat is any food which is solid and is not liquid. So reading the King James Version of the Bible, it says, I have given you every seed-bearing plant, every fruit-bearing seed. In other words, all vegetables. This for you shall be meat. So yes, we can eat meat, but God commands us to eat vegetables as meat. That is our food. So there's a commandment right off the bat. And Jesus accentuates it. Jesus says God commanded us to eat vegetable meat, and that's what we eat. There you go. The original commandment was to be purely vegetarian and vegan, and that's the Garden of Eden.
Right. Do you think that some of the people that came after Jesus, like Paul and some of the others who wanted to expand Christianity, thought maybe it's too hard to demand that they be vegan, and so they kind of loosened up the rules?
Well, it's difficult to say about Paul because there are so many angles on Paul. I was planning on reading from some of these books, but I guess I won't do that. But in The Vegetarianism of Jesus Christ, Charles Slavic, page 44 does a terrific job on some of the things that Paul says. And interestingly enough, yesterday on Facebook, they were citing Romans 14. And Paul, dare I say, is maybe schizoid, bipolar, excuse me, sorry. But he starts out by saying that those weak in faith only eat vegetables. So of course the meat eaters point to that, but they forget there's a whole chapter there with 20 plus verses. And by the time he gets to verse 21, he says it is good neither to eat meat nor to drink wine. And the word good and God are synonymous. That's why they call it the good book. So he's saying it is God not to eat meat nor to drink wine. So this is how he concludes. So Paul is caught in midair. Keith Akers' book, The Lost Religion of Jesus, that's another great book. The Forgotten Beginnings of Creation in Christianity, outstanding, which Keith Akers was involved with as well. In his book, A Vegetarian Source Book, quotes Paul as saying, I am vegetarian, I want to be pure, so when I meet Jesus, I will be pure. So Paul is a mixed bag. It's difficult to say about Paul. At times he talks against vegetarianism, and at times he talks very much for it. But then again, one has to take into account that books have been distorted and rewritten. And the Bible itself says to separate the wheat from the chaff. Realize the beautiful verses and realize the verses that don't conform and are in accordance with compassion and kindness, are helpful to life. It's upon us to realize the beautiful verses and realize the verses that don't conform and are in accordance with compassion and kindness and are helpful to life. It's upon us to be discerning. And if I could recommend, there's a spiritual awakening radio, James Bean. He's got some good material that one can not only read but listen to on the original Christians being purely vegetarian, vegan. And the reason I'm bringing it up is that Hieronymus, who became Saint Jerome, makes a very, very pitiful statement saying that the stinking juices of meat were shoved down our throat. Jesus the Christ has joined the beginning with the end, and we no longer eat this food. And that truly is what is the format of the Bible that very, very few people point out, because the very first page of the Bible does command veganism. Genesis 1:29. That's the first chapter. The second chapter literally says another account of creation, which is a little confusing, but we got to go with what's there, right? But this time they call it the tree of life. And Keith Akers points out that one of the great prophets who Jesus stood by, who were vegan and who spoke out against animal sacrifices, Amos, spoke in terms of opposition. What was peaceful, what was violent, what was evil, detrimental, what was good. And the revelation of St. John the Divine, which closes out the Bible, literally says in chapter 22 that the nations shall be healed eating from the tree of life. So going right back to the beginning, right back to the vegan commandment that from the outset of the Bible.
Thanks. Yeah, I will look that up. I had not heard that before about Revelation 22.
Yeah, the revelation of St. John the Divine. It's also called the revelation of Jesus Christ. The last chapter literally says healing all the nations to join the end with the beginning.